everybody, I hope that you're ready to ragtime, because today we're looking at a banjo arrangement of Maple Leaf Rag. This is not my arrangement. I transcribed this from Cera, so I'm going to link to that below. It's a cool little video where he's playing with a whole band. Now, it's relatively long, but there's only 4 sections. There's an A and a B, which is most of this tune, and then a C and a D, which I think of as the outro. So what I'm going to do is I'll play through all 4 sections without any breaks or pauses. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes ragtime sound like ragtime, talk a little bit about the techniques that are being used here to put it on the banjo, and then I'm going to go line by line through the tablature. So the tab will be up on the video, but unfortunately if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm only going to put up the A and the B sections, which is most of the tune. This C and D section will be available on my Patreon, and if you want a PDF of the tab, that's also going to be available on my Patreon. Anywho, enough talking. Let's hear how this sounds. All right, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that was actually trickier than I thought to not do those repeats. Anywho, that was good enough. Let's play through this. So let's talk a little bit about it. So, ragtime. What makes ragtime sound like ragtime? So, ragtime is like a proto-jazz thing. It comes out of this like early American sound. So, there's a lot of things that it has in common with bluegrass. Primarily like this swing feeling and the kind of song structure that we do. Now, one thing that I think is the most interesting thing is ragtime, primarily because the way what it comes from with the bars and the way it was played, people would play it on. It was often played on a piano. It's very like piano-based music because it was something that could be played in a bar by one person on a piano. So that actually kind of changes the way it's played or the things that are happening in it. So, for example, when you think of someone singing, people don't often sing huge octave ranges. They tend to sit within, I don't know, like a sixth or so. You know, they'll go from here to here or here. But on a piano, you've got a huge range of notes. So you'll notice in this, we're kind of like blaring up and blaring back down. And that's part of the ragtime sound, is like just the fact that we're like spread out over different octaves. And we play a lot of arpeggios. So we'll talk a little bit about those chord shapes in a second. Another thing that's really important to notice with ragtime is the use of rhythmical syncopation, right? There's a lot of these times where we don't play that first beat, which is really uncommon in bluegrass. In bluegrass, it tends to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we're doing a lot of this. 1, right? We're not even playing that first beat. Right? And a lot of these patterns of 3, you know. We're still hearing 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but we're playing patterns of 3 to kind of create this rhythmical syncopation. Which, if you don't know what syncopation means, it means basically you're accenting or playing notes that are off the beat. right? Also really prevalent in lots of funk and dance music. Anywho, so a couple things that we really want to know about this. Oh, one thing I'll mention is if you're more theory inclined, Maple Leaf Rag or ragtime in general kind of sticks pretty close to the chords, but we use a little bit of a different chordal vocabulary. So there's a lot of like seventh chords and changing of keys that is happening. Like in this tune, we switch from a G and we modulate to the key of C. There's also a lot of these what we'll call like sixth chords, or just adding the sixth note. So for example, in the key of, or when you're playing a C chord, which contains the first, third, and fifth of the key, right? C, E, and G, C, D, E, F, G. We'll also add the sixth note, so C, D, E, F, G, A. After G comes A, right? So if we start throwing those A notes, that kind of adding those six in there is really common here. We'll do it on the G, right? Or even on the D. Right? So that's a big thing, and I'll point it out as it comes up, but I'm not going to talk too much about that theory. Okay, now let's talk about the techniques. So a couple things we got to get into is chord shapes. Chord shapes, chord shapes, chord shapes. Before you even start this, if you don't know how to play your G chords up and down, and your C chords up and down, you should really kind of go through that. I'll put those chord shapes up here, but I'm not going to talk about where to play them. But a lot of this is kind of tied to those shapes. So if you know those shapes, it makes it way, way easier. The other thing, and primarily what this is we're playing a single string technique. Now, single string technique is kind of emulating a guitar player or a mandolin player's flat pick. So normally they go down, up, down, up, down, up. Now, so if we're playing on one string, which is why they call it single string, on the banjo it's kind of tough. You know, we tend to do rolls. So if we're on one string, what we'll do is pretend to do an alternating thing by going thumb, index, which we're emulating this down and up of a flat pick, right? So we can do that on each string. But when we get to the first string, because our middle finger is normally there, we often alternate between our thumb and our middle finger. So if that's something you've never done, spend a little bit of time just kind of getting used to this sort of thing. Now, quick note on this. I do have the fingers written down here, but I might change them up a little bit, depending, like, there's certain things that are important and certain things that aren't important. Now, as a guitar player, primarily, I'm kind of following guitar player logic, or what I do on the guitar, which means anything that's an upbeat, right, I tend to get with an upstroke on the guitar, because it's just easy to constantly be going down, up, down, up, down, up. So if I want that up, 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 I'm already doing it. So generally on the banjo, and I'm not the only person who does this, if I have an upbeat, I will play with my index finger. And if I have a downbeat, I will do it with my thumb. Now, because of the fact that we're mixing rolls and single string, that's not always possible. So sometimes I'll make the decision that I want to do an upbeat with a thumb, or a downbeat with an index finger. And that's not wrong. The main thing that you want to watch out for is that you're not doing consecutive eighth notes with your thumb, like with your thumb or your index. You want it kind of always alternating. So we'll talk about that as that comes up. But let's get into it. So let's start this A section. I'm going to play through the first line. Oh, actually, before I get into that, let's talk quickly about the form. I did the intro, which is actually the last 8 bars of the A section. So when I played it through, that's the 8 bars of that A section is played as the intro. So we're not going to look at that first. We're going to look at the A section as a whole. But just know that the intro is the first 8 bars. And the way Marco Cera plays it is he plays that intro, the last 8 bars of the A section. Then he plays A, so twice. Then B twice. Then he goes back to A. And then he goes into the C section, C, D. So that's the form. A, B, B, A, C, D. Now let's get into the tab. Here's the A section. Let's do it. It goes like this. I'm going to play the first line. Okay? So just really quickly, we have a G chord here, and we have a D chord here. And we're just essentially playing that. We have this little bass line. That's the first bit. And then we have these offbeated. Right? Bass line again. Here we are in the G, the D. So if you know that shape, that's pretty easy. Now moving on to the second line, I'll play it first. Alright, so this is kind of cool. We play an E flat arpeggio, and we actually have to switch strings to do it. So I'm going those two notes, and then I'm sliding up with my index finger. So it's thumb, index, and then on the D we're just playing. So one thing to note here is, again, just like this part, we're really just playing an arpeggio. We're only playing notes of the chord. Then we repeat it. Now we have a G minor chord, which is a bit odd, but if you know your G minor shapes, we're just literally running up them. Right? Now the technique that I'm doing here is like thumb, index, thumb, middle, which is generally speaking what I'll do when I'm moving up the strings that way. And that often takes a little bit of practice if you're not comfortable with that. But this is a perfect exercise for that. Really, really good exercise for getting all your minor chord shapes, because you have to do them. You'll also notice when it gets going fast, what I tend to do is slide up to the next one. So it's important that whatever finger I want to use on the thick string for the next one is the finger I'm using to slide up to that note. Okay, next part. Now we start with a diminished chord. Not something you're very we do often in a bluegrass tune, but a quick way to play a play a diminished chord on a banjo is you're going to take a major chord, and then you take the root note and you move everything but the root note back a fret. Some of these shapes are kind of hard to play, but we could just even play these three notes, which is what we're doing on this one. So I have this G chord up here, I move it back a fret except for the G note, and I've got this diminished chord. So this is what this line sounds like. 2, 3, 4. Alright, okay, so that diminished chord resolves into the major. And that's, again, the sixth. Cool, and then we're down here at the root. That's a little bit tough here because I tend to do this stretch between my first and middle finger here to the G and the A, because then my pinky finger is ready to get this B. It's kind of a weird stretch if you're not used to it. But that's that line. Now the next line, fortunately, is the same thing we just did, but down an octave. So this shape literally down here, bigger stretch, but the same thing. That's it there. Same thing, 12 frets higher. And this is a little different because we're using an open string, but it's the same notes. Okay, let's take a look at the B section. So, B section, we don't play the first beat, we get this That's the first line there. Now one thing I'll just point out to you is this is a D chord, and we're just taking that first note, the D, and we're chromatically moving it down. D, da, da, da. So it's a little bit tough here because I have to switch my shape here at some point here, and then I go down to this D, which is just a bar A-shaped D. I believe that Cera does this, and I put this in the tab. And he plays this note, the B note, here instead of here. I kind of like doing it. But you can also do... You don't have to move your hand there. Again, that's the bar A-shaped D. Helps if you know your chords. Then we go to this G shape, which we've done a couple times before. Again, hitting that 6 on the G chord. Nice. Okay, then we have the next line. Right, so we have a D chord here, and then a D7 with the 6, the E note on top. D chord, D13 or D7 and 6 at the same time. Back to this G, we've already done this. Then we repeat that first line, basically. And all we have here is just a descending line with the F shape. right? G, G flat, F, and we're going to an E. So let's take a look at that next line. So this part's kind of tough, and this is one of these spots where I choose something different. Because normally it's on an offbeat, 1, right? But I feel really uncomfortable getting that with my index finger. So I'm just going thumb, index, thumb, middle. 1, 1. Double stops. This part's kind of interesting because you got to get the first note with your index, index, thumb. Right? There. That's the A and the B sections. Right? So let me just play through them at a slow time with the tempo so that you can have this. Sounds like this. 1, 2, 3. B. Alright, so that's going to end the YouTube video, but Patreon people, follow me into the C section here. So, the C section is now in the... Oh, I'll say bye to the YouTubers. Bye-bye!